Competitors, if you would please come forward and take your places. Writing is allowed after all competitors have been seated. As our room chairman has mentioned, competitors have already been briefed as to the rules of the competition and realize that their general discussion should be directed toward each other rather than the audience. In my role as moderator, I will not attempt to control or direct this discussion. Remember, the discussion is meant to simulate a committee meeting, not a panel discussion with point, counterpoint, and an active moderator. With that in mind, the burden is on the competitors to moderate themselves and conduct themselves in a cooperative and congenial manner. Competitors, congratulations on your advancement here to the final round. The competitors for this round are Stacy Vincent, Dylan Kerstad, Ann Larson, and Allison Honea. We'll begin this discussion with a 30-second opening statement from each competitor. Following the opening statements will be 30 minutes of open discussion, followed by 1 minute of quiet time for the competitors to prepare their 1-minute closing statement. Competitors, in voluntary order, please stand and give your opening statements. Please direct your opening statements to the audience, and the timer will indicate when your 30 seconds has elapsed. You may now begin.
70% of farms won't transfer from first generation to second. This statistic is daunting. Transferring operations is not a topic that anyone is overly excited to discuss, but it is essential for the continuation of family farms. With the help of Farm Bureau, older generations can be encouraged to start the planning process while being given the resources to see it through. And as young farmers and ranchers, this is of the utmost importance for us to continue living the life we know and love.
A quote by Benjamin Franklin explains the relevance of this topic. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. The importance of this topic is immeasurable, as the future of agriculture depends on the successful preparation of our farmers and ranchers to prepare for the generational transfer. I'm excited to discuss Farm Bureau's role in promoting legislation to preserve agriculture, providing superior succession planning resources, and most importantly, action plans we can all take back to our county farm bureaus.
Farming alongside my brother and father, I can attest to the minimal communication and very different objectives for our operation. As Farm Bureau, we need to offer what we guarantee in our membership: information, education, and legislation about farm succession, so we can guarantee that farm succession and farm legacies live on.
Most farmers have a pretty good idea of what they want to accomplish when it comes to succession, yet it may be a little fuzzy and undefined. In an era when farm transition is at the forefront, family relationships and communication are key to a successful transition plan. Utilizing the stages of succession model, Farm Bureau can provide the necessary leadership in order to sustain the family farm.
You have heard the opening statements. The competitors may now proceed with the discussion. Competitors, please direct your discussion to your fellow panel members.
Well, I think if we want to start out at somewhere, just starting out what Farm Bureau does now, what they offer. I know different states offer different things, as a state level, local level, things like that. With South Carolina, we actually have 2 full-time staff members that are just dedicated to succession planning, and they are offered to anyone that's a member of Farm Bureau free of service. Do any of you have things that we can kind of start off with as jumping off points on what your state already does to help with this planning stage?
I think that one thing that my state does to start off with the succession planning is we have a legacy program. We're in the legacy program, which is sponsored by a couple of our partners as well. And with that legacy program, we assure that farmers will have the resources that they need, which I think a lot of us touched on in our opening statements. And I think that that resource piece is really important because farmers know with the succession, the resources are going to be the part that definitely makes their section, as you said, either fail or do well.
And thank you for that. And Allison, I think you started off the right way by asking what do our individual states provide our farmers and ranchers, because really it gets down to at the grassroots level, at the County Farm Bureau, we need to make sure that we have ideas and solutions to help this process. I think the importance here will be to identify problems that we currently have so that we can prescribe a formula for the future. And I really think there's three things there. Legislation, whether it's estate taxes or regulations. 2, resources, legacy project like you just mentioned. And 3, our county farm bureaus. The stronger they are, the stronger the rest of our organization will be. And the last thing I'd like to say on there, in my opinion, one of the biggest shortfalls we have right now is our estate taxes for agriculture. As our president, Bob Stallman, pointed out in our opening session, farmland values have risen greatly in the last 5-6 years. You know, you look at the average price of farmland in Iowa at just over $8,300. He pointed out to us that it only takes 120 acres to get to $1 million. So it doesn't take a very large farm to where you're already having to pay huge estate taxes, and we need to make sure we have legislation in place that will preserve agriculture. Any thoughts on that, Stacy?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that if you listen to Secretary Stallman's comments about 2 weeks ago in the press release, he almost seemed like the wind was knocked out of him because he wanted that new farm bill to get passed because it had a lot of hope for farm secession. Not saying that it's not still around the corner, but yeah, you're right. And so therefore we have to be able to be looking ahead of it. And Allison, as you were pointing out, in Kentucky we have also some secession planners as well. And one of the things that we also have is the Ag Economics Department at the University of Kentucky has started what's called the Kentucky Farm Start. It was part of the 2008 Farm Bill that was for young farmer and ranchers in order to sustain it. Now, since 1964, the Ag Econ Department at UK has been focused on trying to make sure that farm transitions are done well. I'm not going to say that there's a relationship here, but Kentucky is 4th in the nation. Little old state of Kentucky, 4th in the nation in the number of family farms. All right, Texas, Missouri, Iowa, Kentucky. So with the focus like that on universities, Ann, what is your university doing?
I'd like to focus kind of on the Farm Bureau side of it, but there are universities in several states surrounding my state and in the Midwest. And one of the Midwest universities is Iowa State University with their Farm On program, which actually sets up farmers who do not have heirs to their farm and then gives them a chance to find young farmers who are interested in taking over a production farm. And I think that we have covered so many topics already because this is such a vast issue. But I think that someone who summarized it the best was Dylan. And I know that you're talking a lot about taxes, and the taxes in the Farm Bill are a very separate issue and a very complex issue. And right now with the tax estate the way that it is and different in every state, I'd really like to touch on something that you said about the problems with succession planning resources. And one of the major problems that I've encountered as my family has gone through a farm succession and now looks to go through another farm succession to my brother is that a lot of farm bureaus think that the solution is to hold an 8-hour workshop one day a year, and that all your farm succession solutions will be solved. And there are several other universities that do extensive, and I think that Farm Bureau needs to start focusing on extensive farm planning. This is a once-a-month thing for a year. And I was wondering if anyone had any personal experience going through the succession, because I know that you can't meet every month in harvest and you can't meet every month in planning, but this is something that needs to be really visited.
And I appreciate that, and I do have a great story that I'd like to share with all of you. And it happened to occur in our state of Arizona. As I was doing research, I was looking at the Farm Legacy Project website, which is administered through the Farm Journal, and they have Leave a Legacy, and it's a TV show that they pick a family and do a presentation on. And the particular family that they picked from Arizona was a dairy family. The really unique situation about this family is their dairy is right in the middle of Phoenix. I mean, it's actually in Glendale, which is a large city right next to Phoenix. It's only a few short miles from Cardinal Stadium. They could probably walk across the street to Walmart if they wanted to. I guess the point of this story that I want to bring out is every single operation is different. Every operation has different needs. And what the individual from Arizona said, the father, is it's up to the family to take the action. But I believe the role as Farm Bureau is we can really play an intermediary, whether we are connecting the experts with the farmers or our own organization. We have professionals in our own organization that can also work with farmers, but ultimately it's up to the individual, so we need to make sure we hold them accountable and give them the best support and resources that we can. Any thoughts, ideas on that?
And
Dylan,
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
but I think that it's all these points are great, but I also think we need to go back. I mean, we know what Farm Bureau does as of now. We know there's workshops, like you said. There were even workshops, on our state level. There's workshops everywhere that people can go to, but what they take out of it is only what they want to take out of it. And I think we need to step back also, and how can we start the conversation to begin with? Because if we're wanting to encourage both generations, we as young farmers need to step up and say, hey, we want to come back to the farm. If there's multiple children in the family, there may be some that want to continue with the farm, some that don't. We need to figure out how we can encourage the older generations. The average age of Farm Bureau members, especially on board of directors and things at these kind of meetings, are the generation that need to start thinking ahead to the future. And as young farmers, we can help them to get to the resources because we are, technologically savvy. We can help them get what they need to have to do that. And also, like I said, just tell them we're interested. We want to help you with this. We're not trying to force you into retirement. We're not trying to force you out of the farm. We want to be a part of the farm and do whatever we can to help, whether it's just joining them and hoping that it can support more than one family, or whether it's bringing in a niche market or, adding something to the farm.
Allison, you're exactly right. And one of the things that I guess I'm threw off a little bit because the Kentucky Farm Bureau as well as the American Farm Bureau are doing more than just one-day workshops. And so, I went to online because I'm a little excited because they're about to unveil the elegacyproject.com, which is going to be a great asset for our farmers through American Farm Bureau. So I think that it's beautiful that I think that Kentucky Farm Bureau as well as American Farm Bureau are doing a lot more to try to sustain it. And Allison, you're correct when we're saying that it's a grassroots organization, and we have to start with that. And when you're talking about an experience, I think about the Pittman and Callaway farm that is over in West Kentucky. Four brothers from two uncles. And what it was you're talking about some young men who were in Charlotte, Indianapolis, all over the place. And they decided, hey, we need to come back home. And when they came back home, it was Farm Bureau who has been working with them at trying to do the transition plan. When I was talking to Jacob on the phone on the ride down here, he said, this has been over a year that Farm Bureau has been working with us. So he had never been to any little workshops. It was more of an investment. But here's my only concern. We're talking about short-term fix to a short-term issue, which is good. And these legacy projects can help that. But we also have to be thinking about a long-term solution, because otherwise, 20 years from now, this will be the discussion meet topic again. And so therefore, we have to think about a succession model. And the stages of succession say we start from birth. We start from birth where we start educating people. We put it in our school curriculums. Hey, what is it like? Nebraska, I think, has even put together a middle school curriculum on becoming an entrepreneur. Do you all have any curriculum in your states, Allison, in South Carolina, that possibly is allowing that?
Not particularly, none that I'm familiar with that's focused specifically on planning or things like that. But I think, as we talked about earlier, just partnering with our land-grant institutions, like myself, Clemson University is the land-grant institution in South Carolina, and getting them to focus more on the financial aspects, economic aspects, because a lot of the concerns of the older generation are that the farm's going to sink once it transfers because the younger generation doesn't know how to adequately manage the financial side, the business side. They know how to drive the tractor. They know how to harvest the crops or milk the cows or the manual work that needs to be done, but they're not as familiar with the other parts because things have changed. Over generations, they fall between the gaps, and maybe they just weren't involved in the business side of the farm. And I think that partnering, like you said, young is great, focusing on young children, educating them as they come up, and that will even encourage the adults to start thinking about the planning process even sooner, but also focusing on like the land-grant colleges and getting them involved in this process so that we can educate the young farmer and rancher age group so that when they go back home, their parents or grandparents or whoever have more confidence in their ability to be able to run the farm in the next generation.
And I think we've been talking a lot about state-specific examples, and we need to look at a national focus. And it's great that your program is working in Kentucky, and I'm so glad that your program is working in South Carolina, but we need to have a national template. And I know that's hard to say because the farms are so diverse, and transferring a livestock farm is so completely different than transferring a grain farm. And so when we start looking at this at a national focus, I think that what it needs to be is a national push for grassroots. And when you look at a grassroots level, and I know that you mentioned starting the conversation, and I think that is extremely important because it is that first conversation. And it's a pretty simple first conversation. You have to get everyone out of their chore clothes and get them somewhere that they can sit down and have a business meeting. It's not sitting on the shop bench. It's not in passing on the farm in the freestall barn. This means that you sit down in a business setting and you plan the future of your business. And I think that county farm bureaus and state farm bureaus can do a simple solution as offering a conference room and having that conference room available for people to get out of their chore clothes, to get their business information together, to get the key players around the table and really have a business-like conversation. Because as you said, things change. And if we can provide the Farm Bureau as the business center for the farmer, so they have a place to meet, they have the resources they need, and they have the connections they need to make Farm Bureau their resource and their business center that they might have on the farm. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Dylan.
And you're absolutely right, talking about focusing on a solution on the national level. And that's what our Farm Bureau organization is all about. We start at the very grassroots level. We work ourselves up to the national level because we bring all of our voices together to create this one vision, which this meeting's all about. And I like what you brought up earlier, Stacy, about let's find a long-term solution. We've discussed short-term solutions, but let's put our heads together and talk about a long-term solution. And I think an important step that we've already been doing such a great job of, and when I say we, I mean our American Farm Bureau Federation, and that is promoting legislation to preserve our industry. I think we did have a big win as of the first of this year with the permanent setting of the estate tax exemption level at $5 million and the highest tax rate of 40%, which is up from 35% previously. But I think that should be a primary focus of ours, and if we all work together, I think Farm Bureau can bring all of agriculture together and share our voice and say, hey, we need to make sure that we have a consistent estate tax policy so we can make our plans work. I looked at the past 30-year history of estate tax exemptions and rates. It's crazy. I mean, it changes every year. How can you effectively make a plan and see through it that works if you have no idea what the estate tax level or rate is going to be? So, whether it's permanent repeal, which is ultimately what we're looking for. I do think we did hit a victory in Washington after the first of the year, but if we can keep working together, I think that's the right path to go. Any thoughts, ideas on that?
Dylan, you hit the nail right on the head with that. And I don't know if we've all noticed, but permanent in D.C. is a pretty loose word. And I think that we need to encourage American Farm Bureau to not back off now that we have this permanent solution, that our lobbyists needs to be working on that every single day, bringing that up to our legislators to remind them that you may have voted on a permanent solution, but it's affecting our farmers, and it's affecting them in the field. And before we had this, Now we have this, and that's going to be so important in the future. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, that I think that we have to remember that nothing is truly permanent, and staying vigilant to make sure that our lobbyists know that this is important to us and that it means a lot for not only our generation, but for future generations. And I'm sorry that I cut you off.
Okay.
So, Allison, do you have something
And
to
I
add?
think just to add to what Dylan says, we all know that it's important. The estate tax issue was preached, I'm sure, in every state. Not only on the national level, but everybody was worried about what was going to happen in Washington. But also, it's been proven that more transfers fail just because of lack of estate planning, not because of estate taxes. So not only is that important, but like we've all talked about, we have to continue to offer these resources. And just like you said, we don't know what the estate tax, they say permanent, but permanent is not a word that means very much there. So, encourage a yearly meeting. Like you said, offer the Farm Bureau office. Like I said, in my state, we have 2 people that can meet with them whenever they want. Say, okay, every year, this month of every year, we're going to come in, sit down, reevaluate what's going on, whether it's through, legislation that's been passed or changed, whether it's something on the farm, if you've had, changes in family members or operation changes, and reevaluate so that, like you said, so we can continue. And I know it's not a long-term plan as far as Farm Bureau goes, but a long-term plan for farmers so that they don't create a plan, they spend all of this time worry, going through it, and then in 2 years, it's not even going to be effective if something were to happen, because, the ultimate goal is you want to stay a family afterwards. You don't want to find out when, whoever, and nobody likes to talk about death. That's part of the reason that this planning process is so complicated for people, is because no one wants to address what the real issue is. But when someone passes away and you evaluate the plan then and say, oh, well, we didn't look at that right, or that was 5 years ago, and now we have 2 more people involved in the farm. What are we going to do now? And, you want to honor the wishes of whoever is there that's starting the planning process, but we need to, as Farm Bureau members, step up and say, okay, we want to have these continued resources, and so we can address and we can educate people on what the legislation is when they're maybe not familiar with that.
Allison, you're right. And one thing that we have to realize is not every child wants to come back to the farm.
Right.
My brother said he went to law school where he didn't have to cut a single stalk of tobacco again. All right? And I understand that, maybe, sort of, but for me, I want to come back to the farm. I want to be able to have that successful transition plan with my family. But when we look at things, and again, and like you're saying at a national level, I get excited about American Farm Bureau's push on the e-legacy project that's about to be unveiled. One of the things that they were talking about, and it's by the creator that's working through Farm Journal magazine right now, and one of the things that he's encouraging is he's saying, look, we're going to have a matchmaker.com for farmers. So, and I'm sure you guys read the article where the Utah family found a family in Iowa that said, you know what, all of our children have left, but we want to keep this farm alive. It reminds me of the farm that my wife and I bought. It was Mr. Campbell who was dying of cancer, and he took me out on the back of his farm, and he said, I want you to buy this. The reason why he wanted me to buy it was because he didn't want it to turn into a subdivision. And so when we think about that, Farm Bureau can also serve as that matchmaker, make me a match with finding those other farmers that could come in here. That in itself, you can work out legal aspects that can even work with the tax section that you're talking about.
Stacy, you're absolutely right, and I'm hearing a lot of great ideas across the table, and we've come up with some good solutions too. I think in adding to those solutions, as we've briefly pointed out, as a Farm Bureau organization, we should play an intermediary role to connect our farmers and ranchers with the best resources out there to help them successfully prepare. Like you had mentioned, the Legacy Project. That's the e-Legacy online is brand new. I remember from John Sylvester, he gave us some information to prepare for this question, and he said, just as you mentioned, they want to partner with Farm Bureau, and we could even have Farm Bureau give our members a discounted price, a discounted monthly price, so that they have access to that online resource. It's a one-stop shop for all different tax, accounting, legal advisors. They can move along the process at their own pace. It's less stressful. our farmers and ranchers are busy all day long. Maybe they want to set aside a certain amount of time during the night to take a look at that. But ultimately, we need to make sure that our farmers and ranchers are cognizant of the fact that they need to take action. We need to have them take action, because that's the main problem here, is they're not taking action, and they need to be prepared. Whether it's Dr. David Cole, I've read a lot of his information. He is just an outstanding guy and an expert on generational transfers and succession planning. One of the pieces of advice that he gives is back to what you talked about, Stacy, of the equitable distribution between on-farm active children and non-farm non-active children. One of the things he pointed out is have the non-active farm children be labeled as a beneficiary on the parents' insurance policy. That way, their stuff is taken care of, but transfer all the assets like the land, the equipment, all of those illiquid assets, transfer those into a trust and let the on-farm kids have control of those, because that's what they need to do to run their business. And without those things, if you give the non-farm kids the land or the equipment, that's a tough thing sometimes, because it causes confrontation within the family. It's tough to keep the operation going. So I think just making sure that we can connect our farmers with all these different resources, and I think that will provide a lot of values to our farmers and ranchers.
And
Ideas on that?
We're sharing so much good information about the personal transfer of farms from one generation to the next. And I think that we can't go too far as a Farm Bureau and step on toes when we get into personal what the farmers want, because I don't think that there's a group that respects confidentiality as much as a group of farmers. So I think that we do need to stay cognizant that some farmers are only going to want a certain level of help from us, but that we can offer all levels, as you said. And I think a really neat thing is that a benefit of being a member of Farm Bureau is that you can carry Farm Bureau insurance. And I know that a lot of the insurance have professionals, not that we have to hire on to staff, but that those are resources that you can use whether you buy that insurance or not, that is a benefit, and that we need to contact and have those names on file so that when it does come time to succeed and you're looking for different resources, you can go to Farm Bureau and they can say, we have XYZ people, and here's the packet of information. And Friday afternoon, we have our conference room open for you to meet. So don't worry about any of the details. We'll help you out on that. But whatever you want to do with your farm, we're going to be here to help you on that path. And I think that's going to be a very important message to craft. As a marketing person, I kind of look at what are we targeting? And then what is the opposition going to say about that? So I think we also need to look at ways that farmers are going to push back against us saying, we want to be involved in your farm succession, because we're going to get a pushback. And I was wondering if anyone had any ideas on if we did implement to prepare our farmers, will we have any pushback that we need to prepare for?
I think, definitely it's going to have pushback because it's a controversial topic. No one wants to talk about it because, like I said, it addresses the topic of death, and nobody wants to talk about that. And then you get in there, and like you were saying, if it's on-farm family members versus non-farm inactive members that are taking part of this process, we're going to have pushback on that also. And I think that's where, even aside from the planning process and aside from the professionals or the people in the state Farm Bureau offices or local Farm Bureau offices that are going to offer help, I think that we as young farmers and ranchers, or even just Farm Bureau members in general, can step back and say, I know this is your concern. We can voice that to them. We can up front say, I know you're going to be concerned about discussing finances in front of everyone, and I know that you're going to be concerned about hurting somebody's feelings, but we have to remember you can leave that at the door. This is, like you said, this is a business meeting. This is something we need to come in here and discuss the pros and the cons of this. And kind of going back to what Dylan said, we need to be fair, not equal when it comes to this. And that's another thing that I think we do need to tread lightly somewhat with farmers, but we also need to get out there all of the pros and the cons, because sometimes they're not aware of these problems and they want to be equal between all of their children, but the one member that's farming has no way to keep the farm running because all they got was, like you said, land or equipment. They have nothing to financially support them to keep the farm running, and I think that's what's so important. And I think going back to how the question's worded is, how are we going to encourage these people to start this process? Farm Bureau already does a ton of stuff for people. I mean, we already have resources. We've talked about all of this, and I think we've all hit good points, whether it's through legislation or whether it's through our state farm bureaus, or like you said, just your family having to sit down and going through multiple generations with this process and learning the process. But I think we really need to step back and say, where does it start? We need to be honest. If anything, we need to be honest. We don't need to sugarcoat this. We need to give them the problems up front. And we were talking about the Legacy Project. One thing that's very good for that is it can be used from people that are starting the process to people that have been using it for years, because there's a readiness assessment tool. They can determine if they're even ready to do this. They may not be. It may be 5 years before the whole family feels like they are actually ready to sit down and talk about it. So I think just as young farmers and ranchers, we are the next generation. We are the ones that are going to be continuing this. And in order to keep this from being a discussion meet topic in 20 years, we need to sit down and be honest with ourselves and know that this is an important issue, and that, without Farm Bureau transfers from generation to generation, or it's not going to continue running as an organization. Farms are no different. They have to transfer from generation to generation, or they're going to go away. So whether it's through family generations or whether it's through, like Iowa does, co-opting people or putting people in touch that don't have a second generation to transfer it to, those are all things we need to focus on. Stacy, do you have something to add to that?
Allison, you were taking the words right out of my mouth. And it was amazing when you were saying this, that one key thing that we have as stakeholders also is our Cooperative Extension Service. They serve as a great outlet to serve as that mediator. As she said, it could be at the Farm Bureau office. However, the problem is you don't want conflict to be with something that also has a business. Farm Bureau's business. People say, okay, there's a conflict there. However, I wonder how much conflict there actually is. It's sometimes like you think it's going to be the bad breakup, and then you find out, oh, she had the same thought I did. Well, the same thing goes. The same thing goes for this. We may have to where my brother and my sister go, you know what, that's fine. But how we can ease the pain is by starting with a survey. Okay, what is it that you're thinking? It could be maybe it's a spouse that we're worried about. And you get that all out on paper, and people are able to go back and reflect. What do you think?
Stacy, you're absolutely right. And Allison, what you had said earlier about succession planning is a tough topic because it can sometimes be controversial. No one likes to talk about death. That's why we're talking about this topic right now, because it's a tough topic, and that's why it's a question at our discussion meet this year. A specific action plan that I'm going to take back to my county in Arizona is I'm going to get the word out there to all. I'm going to use our county farm bureau so we can all come together and get our word out there to these farmers and ranchers and say, hey, get on it. Here's what happens when you don't successfully prepare for transferring the operation. And I think if we can do that, and I think if we can connect with our Farm Bureau members and open them up to a wide array of resources, I think that is the long-term question that will encourage our next generations of farmers and ranchers to return home and to keep our farms and ranches going inevitably.
And I think that you did bring up a good point with the survey and the resources, and I think that if we can just bring together at a national template and get those resources and what it should start with so that the county farm bureaus do have somewhere to start, we are going to be on a great succession, especially since Farm Bureau is a business, but it's in the business of serving its members. And so we need to remember that part of that service is to make sure that their farms transfer to the next generation, because that's how our business stays running. So if you're going to look at it from the business side, it's not a money business. It's in the best. They're in the business of the best interest of farmers, and that's why we all joined this organization as young farmers and ranchers. And I know that you brought up a point, Allison, about marketing, and I love marketing, obviously, because I do it full time. But about the marketing, young farmers and ranchers
Time has
could be
been
marketed.
called. Please prepare your closing statements. I ask that the audience remain quiet for 1 minute. Please put down your pencils, and in voluntary order, please stand and give your 1-minute closing statement.
Alexander Graham Bell said, "Before anything else, preparation is the key to success." I think sitting up here today, we all agree preparation is where we have to start. We have to engage in the conversation and realize that just like the theme of this convention, many voices, one vision, is the same with succession planning. No matter what generation, older or young, we all have one goal, and that's to keep the family farm running. Farm Bureau has the resources, and it is up to us to take advantage of those resources, step up, engage ourselves in the conversation, pull everyone else in to ensure that we continue to live the life that we know and love.
I have chosen to take off-farm employment, but I know that my family's farm, my family's centennial farm, will transfer from my father to my brother. And I know that they will look to Farm Bureau for not only grassroots resources, but to be represented at a national level, as we spoke about. And it's not only that matters. What really matters is that after that, we find a permanent, more long-term solution, so that when my brother decides that he wants to leave the farm to either my children or my nieces and nephews, Farm Bureau will be there for that legacy and our farm to live on.
As a grassroots organization, farms and ranches across America are central to everything we do. Succession planning and generational transfers are a fundamental step of every one of these family operations, and it's vital that we as a Farm Bureau organization provide our knowledge, expertise, and resources to help make this a smooth and successful process. I believe our discussion today identified 3 ways Farm Bureau can promote more transfers of operations. Number 1, we need to keep promoting legislation to preserve our industry. Number 2, we need to serve as an intermediary and make sure we're connecting our farmers and ranchers with good resources and let them know how important this issue is. And finally, number 3, we've identified many great action plans we can all take back to our county farm bureaus, whether it's doing a survey or whether it's just getting the word out there and making sure our farmers and ranchers are taking action. Remember, we are Farm Bureau. We are the voice of agriculture.
The Farm Bureau mission statement utilizes key words such as identify issues, develop solutions, and take action for a better way of life for all. And I'm excited about the conversations that we had here, guys, because what we did was we started efforts that I can take back to my family farm, efforts that I can take back to Kentucky Farm Bureau, and efforts that hopefully can lead to American Farm Bureau Federation push. We talked about buy-in from our universities. We discussed about having a national template for this, which we're going to have through the e-legacy project. Identifying tax issues is a big must. You see, the Farm Bureau mission statement is timeless. It transcends generations. It's something that I'm looking forward to in a 5-generation farm to one day pass down to my 9-month-old daughter. Thank you.
Let's show these competitors our appreciation. At this time, I'll yield control back to Mark.
Thank you, Nathan, for a well-run competition. The judges for today's competition are Dan Danford from Case IH, Kelly Ludlam from AFBF, Kyle Perry from AFBF, Commissioner Julius Johnson from the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and Seth Durner from Viviac. Now I would ask the judges to report with me to the tabulation room. Nathan?
Thank you, judges and competitors. The winner of this final round will be announced during the awards program during the general session this afternoon. We would now like to ask each competitor to please stand and give us a little bit of information about his or herself.
I'm Allison Honea. I'm from Pendleton, South Carolina. I was raised on a dairy farm actually here in Tennessee, and now my husband and I own Holstein and Jersey dairy cattle and raise dairy steers at home. And outside of that, I work as a nurse practitioner at Clemson University.
My name's Ann Larson, and I was born and raised in northern Illinois on a grain farm there, so corn, soybeans, the pretty standard Illinois crops. And I went to the University of Wisconsin-Platteville, and now I am a marketing associate with a Animart Incorporated. They're an animal health and pharmaceutical company.
My name is Dylan Kerstead, born and raised in western South Dakota on a feedlot, ranching, and farming operation. Farm Bureau has been a big part of my family throughout the past. My grandfather, Dick Kerstead, who passed away in 2004, served as president of South Dakota for 4 years. And, that's why I'm here today. I strongly believe in the organization. And right now, I do egg lending in the southwestern part of the United States. And I'd like to thank my wonderful wife, Courtney, my mom, Kelly, and my grandma, Patty, for being here today. Thank you.
Dylan, now that you said that, I have to thank my wife for being here, too.
You'd have been in trouble if you would have forgot.
Otherwise, she'll be saying something to me like... My name is Stacy Vincent, and I grew up just about 45 minutes up I-65 in a small, in the outskirts of the city limits of Pig, Kentucky, population 50. Grew up on a beef, forage, and younger age tobacco farm. My wife and I now live in Lexington, where I'm an assistant professor of agricultural education. My life is devoted. I'm a teacher by choice, not by chance, and my goal is to prepare future educators for our country.
Well, we sure appreciate your support today of our wife and our program, and we look forward to your attendance at the general session where we will announce the winners of the 2013 Young Farmers and Ranchers Award competitions. The general session will be held in the Delta Ballroom starting at 3 p.m. Thank you again.